Crocodiles, unlike many other animal groups I talk about here, have a danger that is well understood and documented given their extent and widespread status. The biggest and scariest of these are well behind them, one of which did actually snack on the big boy dinosaurs known as Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus is a pretty famous croc, for good reason. One of which is that it's been known for a pretty long time. Teeth of this croc was found all the way back in 1858, but were assigned to the genus Polytychodon, which was later found to be a type of pliosaur. It wasn't until 1903 that more teeth and osteoderms were found in Montana by John Bell Hatcher, who, upon learning that these were the remains of a crocodilian and not a dinosaur, immediately lost interest. Hatcher died the very next year before his colleague W.J. Holland examined the material and described it as a new genus, Deinosuchus hatcheri, with Deinosuchus meaning terrible crocodile, and the species name feeling like a bit of a generous tribute considering Hatcher really couldn't give a shit. And more material was found over the decades, which, along with helping to name 2 more species, also helped to build a picture of this colossal animal. Shall we take a look at it? Now, the terms crocodilian and crocodile are 2 pretty important distinctions, because a true crocodile doesn't actually encompass that much. Not even most crocodilians alive today, let alone all the weirdos that used to run/swim around. But Deinosuchus is one that, whilst not a true crocodile, actually would have looked close enough for your average onlooker to call it a crocodile. Deinosuchus was actually a type of alligatorid, falling pretty close on a phylogenetic tree to today's alligators and caimans, boasting a broad snout with a slightly bulbous tip, lined with conical teeth that would have stuck out when the mouth was closed. One difference here though is that the osteoderms, or skin bones that form armour, were unusually large for its size and buried much deeper. Fascinatingly, it's thought that these did more than serve as just protection and thermoregulation like they do in modern crocs. These would have had a high amount of connective tissue beneath the skin, helping with load bearing and allowing Deinosuchus to carry its huge weight on land. Speaking of weight, this thing was huge. Now, as with most fossil animals, size estimates have ranged quite a lot over the years. The first size estimate came in 1954 when the partial skull was extrapolated using the size proportions of a Cuban crocodile, giving an approximate length of 15 meters or 49 feet. But more remains were found that gave a more accurate depiction of the animal, and those numbers got bumped down quite a bit. The current estimates now come in at around 9 to 10 meters or 29.5 to 33 feet long, and a mass of up to 5 tons. But it is thought to have possibly been able to grow to up to 12 meters long or 39 feet and a whopping 8.5 tons, possibly making this guy the same size as the biggest megatheropods. So Deinosuchus is a big guy, but there is quite a lot of discussion as to whether this makes Deinosuchus the biggest crocodilian in all of Earth's history. Deinosuchus was competing in either length, weight, or both with the likes of Graphosaurus, Ramphosuchus, Sarcosuchus and Purosaurus, which I've talked more about here. Now, questions over the longest or the heaviest out of these guys are quite difficult to answer. There probably was a biggest one, but since these size estimates overlap so much, we may never know. Either way, Deinosuchus was definitely the biggest croc of its environment, so let's take a look at that. Deinosuchus remains have been found from across 10 US states, from Texas to Montana to the East Coast, all of which were from formations from between 82 to 73 million years ago. This was a time in Earth's history during which the whole of North America was split in 2 by the Western Interior Seaway, a warm, shallow sea that overflowed through the lower altitude Midwest with Appalachia to the east and Laramidia to the west. This seaway is extremely famous, especially since it existed right up until the end Cretaceous and divided the land masses of many famous dinosaurs. There was a lot of weird beasties within the seaway too, of which I've spoken about in my dedicated video on the subject here. One of the ones that all fauna from both land and sea would definitely want to avoid though was this giant croc. Deinosuchus was actually present on both sides of this seaway, meaning that it was more than capable of crossing it. But it still would have faced some rivalry out there, and fossil deposits seems to show that it was in its element in estuary environments. Sharing this environment were the usual smaller mammals and reptiles, pterosaurs, of which it's likely only the fishers would have anything to worry about with this croc, and the group that made up most of the menu for Deinosuchus, dinosaurs. On land during this time were the thescelosaurids such as Albertodromaeus and Orodromaeus, pachycephalosaurs like Spherorophyllus, Stegosaurus and Hanseatia, and theropods like Dinodon, Dromaeosaurus, Dynamoterra, Lythronax, Daspletosaurus, and Appalachiosaurus. If Deinosuchus was in the mood for a particular dinosaur and was willing to cross the seaway, it also could have found a much higher abundance of hadrosaurs to the east, such as Lamiosaurus, Critosaurus, and Hadrosaurus itself. But if it fancied Ceratopsian for lunch, it could travel to the western Laramidia, where it would find Albertoceratops, Anchiceratops, Centrosaurus, Diabloceratops, Gremlin, Nasutoceratops, the list goes on. Now it's more important than usual to go through what was keeping Deinosuchus company here, because most of what I mentioned above would have been on the menu. Edwin Colbert, who studied Deinosuchus back in the 50s, stated, "Certainly this crocodile must have been a predator of dinosaurs. Otherwise, why would it have been so overwhelmingly gigantic? It hunted in the water where the giant theropods could not go." Furthermore, plenty of hadrosaur remains have been found with tooth marks matching that of Deinosuchus, showing a similar feeding relationship that modern crocs would have with wildebeest and the likes. Another interesting one that may have been on the menu for Deinosuchus was turtles. The teeth towards the back of the jaws are actually shown to be blunter and flatter. Not great for tearing flesh, but much better for cracking shells. Considering Archelon was a contemporary of Deinosuchus, conflict between these two would also have been pretty cool to watch. Well, not for the turtle. David Schwimmer, as in the actual paleontologist and not the guy that just played a paleontologist, concluded that Deinosuchus' feeding habits likely varied with location and size, with the smaller ones feeding mostly on turtles, fish and smaller dinosaurs, and the bigger ones being specialised for the large dinosaurs. Also noting that considering no theropods at the time was even the same size as Deinosuchus, let alone bigger, it was likely the region's apex predator. And if that wasn't scary enough, it's also been found that this bad boy was more than capable of performing the death roll, a move that crocodilians use by barrel rolling with its jaws clamped around prey in order to rip it apart. Very hardcore. Now before I answer today's question, I actually want to ask you guys one. Do you think Deinosuchus is the biggest crocodilian in Earth's history, outweighing the likes of Sarcosuchus or Purosaurus, especially considering its environment? Let me know down below whilst I answer today's question, which comes from J Turner Go9WT, who's asked, how do scientists tell the difference between fossil species? For example, P. leo, lion, or P. onca, jaguar, have visible differences while alive but barely any in their skeletons. How do scientists tell the difference between something like S. fatalis and S. populator? Smilodon fatalis or Smilodon populator. Is it just size or something more detailed? Yeah, how do paleontologists tell the difference between different species? With great difficulty. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The differences between different species within a genus in just the skeleton are so minute that you have to look really carefully and also really have to know what you're looking for. Now, size can be a defining factor, but it's not a hugely reliable one since, this can vary a lot within even the same species, let alone within the same genus. For example, a particularly large lion would be a lot bigger than a particularly small tiger. So size is usually used in conjunction with different proportions when differentiating species within a genus. For example, Smilodon fatalis is not only smaller than Smilodon populator, but it also has a relatively smaller and shallower skull and a less robust build for its size. Same is true in terms of skull depth when looking at the difference between Allosaurus fragilis and Allosaurus germadsoni, not germadseni like I was saying before. Allosaurus is an interesting one here too, actually, because it is a textbook example of how not everyone is in agreement of what can differentiate species. For those that watch my video on Saurophaganax, you'll know that many still argue that rather than being its own genus, it should instead be an additional species of Allosaurus. This is even considering that Saurophaganax differs not only in size and proportions, but also anatomical differences in the vertebrae and tail chevrons. Now, officially, Saurophaganax is its own genus, but this is a great example of how a lot of paleontologists might disagree and how it's kind of a case-by-case basis rather than a hard and fast rule. It's also a lot more difficult when we're talking about fossil material due to their fragmentary nature, and many species have come and gone within a genus over the years. In short, you're not the only one having trouble with this. Anyway, I hope that helped, and I really appreciate you submitting that question as much as I appreciate everyone for watching this and supporting the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really helps me out. And I will catch you guys next time.